again. Just for those of you that are visiting with us this morning, this has kind of become a summer tradition, and you may be wondering why in the world are we talking about movies and eating popcorn on Sunday morning. First of all, it's summertime, and people come and go and on vacations and holidays, and everything's wrapping up and getting ready for school and all that kind of stuff that's going on. So it's because that's hard to do a series in the midst of it. Not quite. We're not that far ahead. We're a little farther back, I guess. There we go. You can leave it there for right now. It's fun. We get to have popcorn. Don't get to have popcorn very often on Sunday mornings. It gives me a chance to deal with some topics that we don't get to deal with normally on a regular basis. So that's part of it. And things like the existence of evil. Last week we talked about regrets. That was a very powerful conversation last week. And it's the things that people talk about on Sunday mornings. And I want to focus on that a little bit, and that's where the blue ocean conversation that we've been talking about before, because as we talk about being focused on reaching our neighbors who live in Southern California, who go to movies on hot summer days when they don't want to sit at home and use all their AC and go to the movies and talk about it, or people are watching Netflix and Amazon Prime and all that kind of stuff. People in California talk about movies. So if you want to understand our culture and the people around us, you need to pay attention to what the movies are saying. Movies are the language and the philosophy and the theology of our culture. They ask questions that culture wants to ask, that culture is feeling. So we put it's a way to put get the pulse of what's happening in culture by paying attention to the questions that are being asked in movies. But more often than not, movies aren't necessarily just asking questions. They're trying to answer the questions. Movies are really trying to tell you how to think. And so if you want to pay attention, if you want to understand what people are, kind of the direction of culture, you need to pay attention to the movies. They have messages, and that sometimes may be shocking to us, but if you pay attention to things like the Oscars, you'll recognize that it's not always the good movies that win. It's the movies that have a resonance with the philosophy and the culture of those that are in the Academy. In fact, you've probably noticed that the Academy has now announced a new category for a winner that is popular, because the popular movies don't always win. The movies that, the Academy is the actors, directors, and people in the industry, right? The Academy isn't normal average Joes. They're people that are inside the industry. So that is part of, they're the ones that get to vote on that. The rest of us, they're not paying attention to the rest of us. So they've started this brand new category. And so the movies that are nominated are movies with clear message that the Academy wants to communicate. Spotlight about the abuse of power in the church, Selma with civil rights movement, the Dallas Buyers Club with the legalization of marijuana, Elysium with health care for the rich and the inequity of that. 12 Years a Slave, obviously about slavery. Argo about American politics and people that are caught up in the machinery of that. All of them have strong messages that they want you to believe. In fact, this philosopher, and I always have a hard time with this guy's name, he says, here's the next slide, I put her up on the screen. Cinema is the ultimate pervert art. It doesn't give you what you desire, it tells you what to desire. The writers, the producers, the musicians, the directors of Hollywood have become the Pied Pipers. They are the philosophers of our culture. President Obama knew this very well. That's why he made 15 trips out to Hollywood during his presidency, because he knew if you can work that crowd, you can influence culture. People watch shows like Trevor Noah's as if it's a real news program. Movies.com says life is boring without contemplating life, and movies are boring without contemplating movies. Jordan Ladd, the actress, said that all I know is movies. I went to school, but movies are my reference point for everything. Kenneth Lonergan said, filmmaking, like any other art, is a profound means of human communication. Beyond the professional pleasure of succeeding or the pain of failing, you want your film to be seen to communicate itself to other people. Director Neil Blomkamp from Elysium in District 9 said, if there isn't a deep core reason for a movie existing, what's the point? As creators and directors, they have a message they want to communicate. Yes, they want to make movies. Yes, they want to be known, but they have something that they're trying to communicate with them, to you. And the problem is that we don't think about movies. We pay attention to the special effects. We pay attention, and we let the leanings of what they're writing, what they're trying to communicate just seep into our souls and we're not even paying attention to it. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "I suspect that men have sometimes derived more spiritual sustenance from myths that they did not believe, like movies in our time, than from a religion that they actually profess." What if we could get people, what if we could start having conversations about movies and using them to have spiritual conversations? What if we could change the direction of the conversation from special effects to spiritual effects? Our mission statement is, we are a family of missionary servants sent as disciples to make disciples. Missionaries to a foreign culture spend years sometimes saturating and learning the culture before they even walk out the door to begin to reach people for Jesus. And if we hope to impact this culture as followers of Jesus, it behooves us as students to understand the language so that we can engage it and influence it for the kingdom of God. So talking about movies is not just not about trying to be cool. 1 Chronicles chapter 12, verse 32 says, "The men of Issachar who understood the times and knew what Israel should do." They understood the times and they knew what we should do. So we should understand. We don't want to be those ivory tower people who are locked in a building, content to sing our songs and do all of the religious acts, and yet we have no way of connecting with the culture around us, and frustrated why they don't want to have anything to do with Jesus when we've done nothing to really engage them for that. We need to understand that the conversations the world is having around us are important to them, and if we want to engage them with the gospel, we need to engage them in the conversations that they are trying to have. Jesus challenged us in Matthew 10, verse 16. He said, "I am sending you out like sheep among wolves. Therefore, be as shrewd as snakes and innocent as doves." So, what are we hoping to accomplish? I'm hoping that this gives us an opportunity to engage truth at whatever level it is. All truth is God's truth, so I hope that we're all changed by truth, even if that comes in the form of a movie. I hope that it will help us to have dialogues with our neighbors, our colleagues, about the things they're watching, about the messages that are coming from these movies. Oftentimes, we want to change. There's a comic that we want to put up. We want to change. Even Hollywood recognizes that this is a problem. They recognize that oftentimes what we're talking about is the nice car, hot babe, the cool yacht, the awesome party, and really what they want us to talk about is in terms of the Wolf of Wall Street, what a bunch of greedy, morally reprehensible, prison-worthy crooks. But we don't talk about that. We look about special effects and the amazingness of what's going on there. So, that being said, I do have some ground rules. The first one is there's no spoilers. I'm not going to tell you anything in this movie, so I'm not going to ruin it for you if this is a movie that you want to go see. I'm not going to, anything that you see on TV or read in the newspapers, that's the only thing I'm going to talk to you about. I'm not making this stuff up. I've actually gone into where the writers and producers and directors and actors have been talking about why they made this movie, the message. So this is the message that they intended. And just because we're talking about doesn't mean we recommend it. Sometimes we'll talk about movies that are absolutely awful, and you've heard me say that. I would not recommend these movies. However, it's something that you still need to talk about. The other part of that is that you need to understand the ratings. You need to understand the rating system to see if it's appropriate to you. And there's websites like Plugged In and others that will help you to understand what things that are in the movie that may or may not be something that would be appropriate for your family to see. So if it's popular, we're going to talk about it. There's a lot of great movies that have come out this year. We're not going to talk about all the great movies. My goal is that we're only going to talk about movies that are in the theater, so if you wanted to, you could walk out today and you could walk to the theater and see it, because those are the ones that are going to be people are talking about right now. So with that being said, here is the trailer for the movie we're going to talk about today. somehow I feel like many of us live like Eeyore, and that's what we see first. Christopher Robin is rated PG, and it's not number one, but it's got a really great message. And I don't often get the chance to talk about kids' movies, so Christopher Robin says goodbye to Pooh and the rest of the gang in the 100-acre wood, and because his father's sending him off to boarding school, of course, Pooh is worried that Christopher Robin will forget him, and so Christopher Robin promises that in 100 years he would never forget him. Well, we know how that goes, right? Soon after he goes to school, his father dies, and at his father's funeral, he's told, you are now the man of the house, which basically means grow up, right? It's time for you to step up and to lead. So he does grow up, and he meets a girl. I'll need a little bit of your help this morning. Our remote is still not working this morning, as in last week. He says goodbye, and he gets married. He meets a girl. He goes off to fight in World War I. He has a job. He gets a job, has a child, and each one of those things takes him a step by step farther away from his childhood and adds to the busyness in his life. The busyness demands that he lets go of his childhood, and indeed, he does forget Pooh. He tells Pooh, he says later, I haven't even thought about you in 30 years. And Pooh, of course, says, I've thought about you every single day. And Christopher Robin is overwhelmed with his work, and he feels like it's out of control. And so he wants to send his daughter to boarding school because, of course, that's where you learn to grow up. That's where he learned to grow up, and so he's going to do the same thing. She tells him that she never gets to see him anymore, and she wants him to read stories to him in bedtime, and he just doesn't see the point in that. It's a waste of time. And he tries to read her science books for bedtime, which, of course, she doesn't want anything to do with, and it's time for her to prepare for the real world. But this is just a child's story, right? This isn't real. None of us have ever gotten so busy that we don't have time for games. We all live lives of leisure and peace in Southern California, and we're known for the slow pace of life that is part of the culture in California. We never have time conflicts on our schedule. We never have to choose between work and family or friends. Those are just fairy tales, right? None of us can relate to that. It would be funny if it weren't so true. Why are we so busy? Why are we so tired? Why are we so disconnected and unconnected? We are created for a relationship with God and with others. So how much of how we are created is proved by that fact? So much of how science tells us that we are created tells us that how destructive it is to live in isolation, how destructive it is to our souls, to our minds, to our bodies. Scripture tells us that God is love, and he exists as three persons, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, perfect, who lived in perfect community together as one being. The love and the community was so perfect that God created humanity in his image, male and female, two persons, not three, to experience that community. Not only the love, but also the shalom, the peace of being perfectly loved and perfectly at rest, perfectly trusting in our Father. After creation was finished and proclaimed good by God, he rested and left a day of rest on the calendar to give us a foretaste every week of what it would be like to be in his presence in eternity. Genesis chapter 2, verse 1. By the way, we're going to be doing a little bit of Bible flipping this morning. So if you don't have a Bible, raise your hands and we'll make sure to get one to you. If you do, there'll be some on the screen, but I'd love it for you to engage with your own copy of Scripture. Genesis chapter 2 begins at verse 1. Thus the heavens and the earth were completed in all their vast array. But the seventh day, God had finished the work he had been doing, so on the seventh day, he rested from all his work. Then God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because it was on that day that he rested from all the work of creating that he had done. By the way, the words seven and Sabbath come from the same root words. Sheba and Sabbath come from the same root word, so that's why the word Sabbath, it really refers to the seventh day. He then provided 4 ways for humans to show their love for him. The first commandments that God gave were enjoy, explore, take care of the earth. Number 2, love your spouse and have lots of kids. Number 3, eat from every tree in the garden, but from one single tree I want you not to eat from. Work every day, but one day a week I want you to rest. That day is the day of rest, the day of Shabbat. It's very important. It is the appetizer day for his peace that awaits all faithful disciples in eternity. It is that perfect rest, that perfect peace, where there's no more stress about paying bills, providing meals, about any of our health issues. The writer of Hebrews wrote in Hebrews chapter 4, verse 9, "There remains then a Sabbath rest for the people of God. For anyone who enters God's rest also rests from their works, just as God did from his. Let us therefore make every effort to enter into that rest." Do you hear that? Let us make every effort to enter into that rest, so that no one will perish by following the example of disobedience. So God's rest, God's peace, is not just for the future, it is also for now. When we trust in him with his provision, for his protection, despite our circumstances, it gives us a peace that is beyond understanding. Taking a Sabbath is an act of worship. Sabbath is an act of trust. Sabbath is an act of surrender to doing things our way. Exodus chapter 16, so flip there if you get a chance. Exodus chapter 16, the Israelites were wandering in the wilderness. And for 6 days a week, God had decided, in order to provide for this 1 million+ people that were wandering through the desert, to provide for them, he provided quail, and he also provided something called manna. We have no idea really what manna is, except for that every morning it appeared with the dew, and as the dew dried away, there was something left on the ground that they could turn into bread, so bread from heaven. In fact, manna means, what is this? They really didn't have an idea what it was. The thing about the manna is that it only lasted for 24 hours. It would rot. If they tried to collect it and keep it, it would rot and turn into maggots and stuff like that by morning. So you could only have enough for the day, and the next day you had to collect more, and the next day you had to collect more. The thing is that God had said that on the seventh day, because that would be work, that he wanted them to rest. So that on the sixth day, they would gather enough for the seventh day as well, but only on that day it would not rot. So verse 27 says, "Nevertheless, some of the people went out on the seventh day to gather it, to work, but they found none. Then Yahweh said to Moses, 'How long will you refuse to keep my commandments and instructions? Bear in mind that Yahweh has given you the Sabbath. That is why on the sixth day he gives you bread for 2 days. Everyone is to stay where they are on the seventh day, and no one is to go out.' So the people then rested on the seventh day." When we stop our working, despite the urgency of the day, despite the urgency of whatever order or project is on our agenda, despite the urgency of bills that need to be paid, we make a statement of worship to God, first of all, to our children, to our families, that we trust that God can provide even when it seems impossible, even when it doesn't make sense to do this. It is also a statement to the world that in the midst of the craziness, that there is a God that can be trusted in. How will the world know about real peace unless we live it out, unless they see it existing in God's people? The world, our children, they're watching what we do. And when we say that we trust in God, but we don't have rest and we don't have peace, some have called this Christian atheism. How can I prove that I am not saved by works if I am working to be saved? Let me say that again. How can I prove that I'm not saved by works if I'm working to be saved? We find rest in the other 3 commandments. So explore, enjoy, and take care of the earth. When we go out there, God asks us to go, not just to pull the weeds, but he asks us to go out and enjoy the beauty of the mountains he's created and the ocean, and go out and take those things and recreate and form. And you're created in your Father's image, so he's a creator, so he's created us to be creators, and he expects us to use that, to go and to form that to reform the earth, to recreate it or recreate into something new. So go out to enjoy and manage nature. Part of that is the way we engage it, and we engage the gifts that God has given us. So the second way is to love your spouse, have lots of kids. If you're not resting, you may have lots of kids, but you're not going to be loving on your spouse and your children the way that you were created. You're created to be in relationship with them. The human family is specifically designed for relationship. The third thing is eat from any tree. And here's the one thing that I'm wrestling. God gave us the entire planet to enjoy. The awesome thing about traveling is every place you go, they have different kinds of fruits and vegetables. And some of them are really weird looking, and some of them are awful tasting, but you get the opportunity, right? You got to try everything once. We were in Scotland, this summer, and you can't go to Scotland and not try haggis. And it actually tastes really good for about 10 seconds. And then there's a really nasty aftertaste that comes with it. But you got to try. I don't ever have to eat it again, but I can say I tried it. I was in Australia and got to try some of the stuff down there. When you travel, you get to, the thing is God created this planet that's full of things for us to enjoy and to explore and to go and to do. And oftentimes I'm standing at the counter and I'm just woofing something down really quick, not even paying attention to what it was. I've usually have an egg for breakfast, and I've been intentionally stopping. I mean, not just stopping and saying, Lord, thank you for this, but thinking about there was a chicken involved with that egg somewhere. Hopefully that chicken is, chickens are chickens, but you can raise a chicken in a way that's honoring to God in the way God designed that animal to be created or to live, or you can abuse the animal. Hopefully, chances are not in our culture that the eggs that we get from our stores are not. We should all buy from the Campbells. They've got very happy chickens these days now that the neighbor's dog is gone. But when we were in England, we stayed at a little farm, and every single egg was a different color because all the chickens laid different colored eggs. How cool is that to have a rainbow in your egg box every day? And eggs are so amazing. Did you know that when we take our eggs, and where do you put them when you come home? Europe, they don't do that. The eggs go straight on the counter, and they have little racks that they keep them on the counter. If you watch Downton Abbey, you'll see right in the middle of the thing, there's a bunch of eggs and it's not just because they're getting ready to use them, that's where they stay until they use them. And eggs can last for weeks, not in the refrigerator. That freaks some of you out. The reason that we put them in the refrigerator is because we wash them, and there's a little, eggs are full of holes. But when God designed it, He designed it so that when the chicken lays the egg, there's a little membrane on the egg that wraps it up and seals those holes so that nothing poisonous or bad will get into it. But we wash it off and put it in cartons, and then we send it to the stores, and so that we have to put it in a refrigerator because the little membrane is gone now. If you get John and the Campbell's eggs, they don't have to go in the refrigerator unless they wash them. And they'll last for weeks that way. Freaks us out. But God designed it that way. That's really amazing to me. But when was the last time you paid attention to how God created chickens and eggs? Probably hardly ever, right? Chickens came first because everything was was created with apparent age. So there's the answer to that question. Adam and Eve probably had belly buttons too. But I was thinking, there's a chicken that was somewhere associated, and there's a farmer somewhere. Hopefully God is blessing that. Hopefully that farmer isn't living in a busyness that we're talking about today, that he can't pay attention to the fact that God has given us an amazing job. He gets to probably live in Iowa somewhere with this amazing ranch that he gets to live on with cornfields and cattle and all that kind of stuff. Hopefully he's living a blessed life. There's people that are involved. There's people involved in the process of getting it to the store. How many people were involved in just me getting one egg to my table, right? We can pay attention. I didn't get it from the Campbells. There would be a lot less people involved, which is probably a good thing. But what I'm saying is just with a simple egg, think about how God's glory can shine, right? Think about all the other things that make it to your table. The bread that you ate, what the farms that grew on, the sunshine that had to pour down on that grain, the water that had to be poured, that had to come down on that, the families that were involved. Those are the kinds of things when we can bring that to the conversation about the food that we're having, then you stop standing up and woofing down food and barely tasting what's going into your mouth, which is basically, right, what my dog does. I can give my dog a bowl of chow, or I can give him a big old steak, and he won't know the difference because he just woofs it down. In fact, the steak will probably be gone faster than the chow. They'll just woof it down. And I sometimes I wonder if they even have taste buds, because I think it would be a waste on a dog. And I wonder if sometimes God thinks that about us, the way we pay attention to our food. That we just woof it down, and all the beauty of that he's laid out before us has just been wasted on us. The dinner table, again, is a reflection. It's an extension of the Lord's table. He invites us to come participate in his meal because eternity is going to be that massive wedding feast in the future that we all get to join into. And our dinner table becomes an appetizer set for that. So when people who are used to just woofing down food and eating alone get to come and sit at our table, we get to help them pay attention to the beauty of every single thing that's on our table. And not only on our table, but the relationships around the table. So food, do you see how just eating can be different if we would just pay attention and to be intentional? If we would rest long enough to pay attention to that, if we're not so busy and hurried that we don't have to rush through a meal. Now, sometimes you just have to. You wake up late and you got to get out the door, and it happens. But that's where you have to be intentional. If you set your alarm and you plan the day and you make sure you don't push the snooze too many times, it gives you the time to pay attention. But if you're not intentional and you just wait to the last minute to get out of bed, you have to rush out and you have to do those kind of things. It makes all the difference in the world. That all these things are good things. But Satan takes those things and he twists them. He takes all those good things and twists them. Taking care of the earth becomes exploitation. Love becomes selfish, and it just becomes sex. Rest becomes luxury instead of a necessity, and it also becomes laziness. But humanity first rebelled at Satan's suggestion to be something. They had to do something. They had to eat from the tree in order to be something better than they were. But God had already said that they were something that was good. They were disobedient, and they ruined the relationship that they were created for. And God said, as a punishment to that, guess what, Adam? You're going to have to work for this now. You're going to have to earn your way in the world. Christopher Robin, like many of us today, takes his responsibility to provide for his family very seriously. The problem with Christopher Robin, also like the rest of us, is not that we don't know how to work. Most of us have been brought up in a culture where we've been taught how to work hard. It's that we don't know how to rest. We don't know how to stop. Eugene Peterson says that many of us are busy because of two reasons. The first one is that we're vain. We want people to think we're important, that we're in demand, that if we're not busy, then that must mean that we're not wanted. So it's part of our vanity. And the second reason that we're busy is because we're lazy. We let our others control our schedules and put demand on our time. And instead of stewarding our time and being able to say no to certain things, we just let other people do it for us. And I would add a third. And the third one is that we're impatient. We want everything microwaved. We want everything, we've got Wi-Fi. If our Wi-Fi isn't fast enough, we complain. If, you go to Starbucks and it's got to be now, you got to go through the drive-through. The thing that amazes me about Starbucks is the drive-through line is often longer. Same thing with In-N-Out. It's often longer in the drive-through than it is if you go inside the restaurant. But that takes extra time, and who wants to be bothered with that? People in Jesus' day were no different. Jesus' disciples wanted him to hurry up and to make his move, to take over, to establish his kingdom. When are you going to do it, Lord? John chapter 7. People wanted him to hurry up and to come and to heal. Remember, they kept dragging him from one place to another. The centurion's daughter in Mark chapter 5, or Lazarus, Lord, why weren't you here sooner? John chapter 11. Yet God is the antithesis of hurry. God has never been in a hurry. He made Abraham wait for 40 years to have the promised child. Are you kidding me? If I was Abraham, no wonder Sarah got, the whole thing with Hagar, that's all about impatience. Yahweh made the Hebrews wait for 400 years in Egypt before they were freed from slavery. 70 years in Babylon. They waited for 7 days for the wall of Jericho to fall. David had to wait for years, decades, for Saul to step down so that he could be king. So many scripture stories involve patience. Yahweh says he came at the right time. Thousands of years it took for him to set up the plan for Jesus to be born. Galatians chapter 4, verse 4. Jesus waited for 30 years for ministry. How many people do you know that came straight out of high school and they go straight to Bible college and they prepare, they jump right in? Lots. They don't wait till they're 30 to get into ministry. That's a waste of time. That doesn't happen these days. He waited for 30 years till he began his ministry. He made disciples. He made them wait for 3 days for the resurrection. Are you serious? He couldn't have done it any sooner than that? For 3 days, they sat in agony waiting for the resurrection to happen. He could have. We know he had the power to do it immediately, right? So God is never about hurry. He's never about rush. He's never about busyness. So now what? Now what's the discipleship question? Now that we've heard the word of God and we've been convicted, hopefully the Spirit is working in our souls, what do we do about it? Will we be obedient to what he's talking to us? The bottom line is that God rested. God rested. And he invites us into his rest. And the question we have to ask ourselves is that really what we want? Because that's really what eternity is. Eternity is entering into his peace, into that relationship that we were created for. Listen as I read the fruits of the Spirit and consider how they are accomplished. How do you do these in the midst of a busy life? Galatians chapter 5, verse 22. The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. How do you do those if you're busy? Oh my goodness, you don't. There's no way you can be loving, joyful, peaceful, patient, kind, good, faithful, gentle, especially gentle when you're busy, right? And have self-control. The beauty of them is that you don't get these fruit by doing anything. You only get them when you're in relationship with God, and then he manifests the fruit through your life. You have to stop and be in relationship to manifest these things. So today, maybe you need patience. Paul tells us, remember, love is patient, 1 Corinthians 13. Maybe you need to slow down. If we want to walk with Jesus, maybe we need to stop running. The persecuted Chinese pastor Wang Mingdao said, to walk with God, you must go at a walking pace. In the book Faith That Endures, the author explains, one of the keys of faith of the suffering church is that God does things slowly. He works with the heart. We are too quick. We have so much to do, so much, in fact, that we never really commune with God as he intended when he created Eden, the perfect fellowship garden. For Wang Mingdao, persecution or the cell in which he found himself was the place where he returned to the walking pace, slowing down, stilling himself enough to commune properly with God. Like Wang, sometimes it takes a crisis to slow us down. Sometimes it takes a hospital bed where you have nothing to do but sit there for days. Sometimes it takes an accident or a disease or sickness or the loss of the job when all of a sudden you have all this time on your hands, or the isolation from family and friends because you've made poor choices and you're all alone. Is that what it will take to get your attention? What Eeyore calls a disastrous expedition? Do you have to wait until heaven to experience that peace, that shalom? And the question is, no, you don't. We don't have to wait. It's for today. We have that opportunity if we will take it. But we have to surrender to trusting in God. Every week we get the opportunity as an act of surrender to trust that he will provide for us. To take a day off, maybe today you need to go to the beach. Maybe you need to be a kid again, to splash in a creek. A time when you do nothing. Pooh says, when you do nothing, it leads to the very best something. Do you find your identity in the work that you do, in your business, in your reputation? Today, maybe you need to release that and to allow God to identify you as his child. Maybe you need to recognize what it means to be a child again. We all know that children love to have fun, but adults have to grow up, right? That's not for us. And do you know that having fun is a holy activity? John Chittister says, leisure is an essential part of spirituality. It is not laziness and it is not selfishness. It is something to do with the depth and breadth and the length and the quality of life. Maybe you need to commit to having more fun. At one point in the movie, during a scene when they're in a hurry, they're rushing somewhere, and Pooh sees someone selling balloons, and he says, "I need a balloon." And Christopher Robin says, "No, you don't need a balloon." He goes, "You want a balloon." And so they stop and get it because he recognizes that if he doesn't, Pooh's going to have a fit. Ever been there with a child that is going to have a fit if they don't get what they want? Pooh, though, is the philosopher in this one, so it's not just about him having a fit. Later, Pooh asks Christopher Robin, he says, "Did the balloon make you happy?" Christopher Robin says, no. And Pooh says, it made me happy. As he walks along, Pooh carries his balloon, and Christopher Robin carries a briefcase that's full of his work papers. And both are very clear depictions of their worldview and what their priorities are. Pooh's balloon represents life and peace and joy, and Christopher Robin's briefcase represents his busyness, his activity, his work. And then Pooh turns to Christopher Robin and says, what's in the case? Is it more important than a balloon? Interesting. And that's the question for all of us. What's in your briefcase? Is it more important than a balloon? Christopher Robin says, there is more to happiness than just balloons. I'm not a kid anymore. Pooh, though, understands what he truly needs, what we all truly need, and that, guess what? We all truly need balloons. And I have balloons for you today. Helium balloons. And what I'm going to do is we respond today. We're going to fill up the balloons, red ones. What's that? What's that? You may need a balloon, for sure. I also have markers for you to write on the balloon. So write on it something you're going to do to slow down, to relax, to rest, spend time with family. Maybe that's what you need to write in your balloon. Let it be a reminder. Let your balloon, maybe just take the balloon home and put it in a corner as a reminder that you need to rest, that you need to take a deep breath, that you need to enjoy the sunset, you need to enjoy the egg you're having for breakfast, or those Scottish steel-cut oats, or whatever it is that you're having. That you need to spend time with him and with your family. Go back to those first commandments. Enjoy, explore, take care, to learn how to recreate again, to love your spouse and the other people that are in your life, to eat and enjoy from every tree. Try the haggis. You won't like it. Work hard every day, but one day, rest. Take a Sabbath. It's an act of surrendering your will to God and what He wants to do in your life. But part of it is some of us are saying no to all of this, and I have to ask you, what is stopping you? Is it your inability to trust in who God is and His ability to provide for you? What's in your suitcase? Sometimes it's not just those things. Sometimes it's a person. And Pooh calls them woozles. Woozles are people who it is something that gets you to forget your friends and family. So maybe you need to, actually I've got some note cards here, and maybe you need to write the name of something that's on your briefcase, in your briefcase that you need to get rid of, and you need to rip it up and throw it away. So we've got note cards, and we've got balloons. Father, you are good to us. We don't come in fear and trembling. We come to you as the good Father who loves us, who gave us good food, who gave us a beautiful planet and good relationships to be in, and yet we rush by it in our hurriedness so often. Forgive us, Father, for not paying attention to your goodness. Help us to start paying attention again. In Jesus' name, amen. I'll be blowing up balloons, so if you want to come get one. If not, you need to talk with someone, life group leaders, community group leaders, and elders will be